Am I hooked up? Yeah. Can you hear me? Okay, good. Well, you people are brave for two reasons. Number one, it's 4:30 at the end of a long day, I gather, and you've girded up your loins to listen to something about T.S. Eliot, which is, Eliot's poetry is heavy sledding. Anyway, we'll see what we can do with it. For quartets, maybe some of you have ventured to get your toe into the water, and you probably found yourself baffled, and so on. Eliot, by the way, Eliot and C.S. Lewis were, the press liked to counterpoise them over against each other, but they were both orthodox, unabashed Christians. But Lewis didn't like Eliot's poetry at all, because Lewis was very much of a traditionalist, and Eliot was very, very much of a modernist, speaking aesthetically and so on. But Lewis paid two of the most elegant compliments that I've ever heard paid from one man to another. They disagreed about Milton. Lewis loved Milton, and Eliot did not like Milton. And Lewis, in one of his writings, said, "The poetry of Milton is like the Great Wall of China. Inside is civilization. Outside are the barbarians, or those like Mr. T.S. Eliot, who have gone out into the wilderness to fast and pray." So I thought that was a lovely compliment. Yeah. To the work here, let me make a couple of comments to help you get a toe into four quartets. I myself would put four quartets, the achievement of this artifact here, in a class, I'm serious, with Chartres Cathedral, Van Eyck's painting, The Adoration of the Mystic Lamb, which is in Ghent, or is it Bruges? Ghent, I think, Belgium, Bach's B minor Mass, and the Mozart Requiem. I think it's one of the great monuments of Western Christian civilization. Probably in some English class you may have made an attempt to read the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock sometime or other. And if you can only remember one line from it, you might remember how poor Prufrock was a pathetic sort of a person. And he kept saying, "Oh, do not ask what is it. Oh, do not ask what is it." He was terrified of asking the question, what is it? Well, Eliot asks the question, what is it? And that's what Four Quartets is about. Now, his poetry is modern, and it is difficult. Eliot believed that poetry should be difficult. He certainly appreciated the tradition of English poetry, but he felt that by the time we get to the 20th century, poets have been deprived of the luxury of writing rhymed and rhythmic poetry. The sun that brief December day rode cheerless over hills of gray, and so on, feeling that that would lull us into a torpor. And we need something brittle. We need something to bother us, to shake us up. So his technique is, it's blunt, it's stark, it's flat, it's prosaic. It's like reading prose, except it is prose brought to its almost sublime purity. It's almost a remorseless purity, and I'll read lines from the poetry presently. A lot of people think poetry is a kind of a gingering up of the language. It's the opposite. It is the purifying and concentrating of language to its absolutely ferocious purity. It's like what you want in a Bunsen burner. You don't want a bonfire. I gather from you chemists and other odd types that what you want in a Bunsen burner is a little prick of blue flame. Is that right? I think, rather than a bonfire. That's what poetry is to language. It is the supreme attempt to purify and concentrate and distill language to this almost remorseless power to speak to us. Now, one thing I will also say by way of introduction is that I would say, some critics might disagree with me, there are no symbols in four quartets or in Eliot's poetry. Rather, what you stumble across in there are cases in point. I would much prefer that word to symbols. A symbol makes you, a symbol is sort of two-dimensional, like a paper doll or something. In Eliot, for example, when you come across a garden, your first inclination, impulse, is to say, wait a minute, how did we get here? What garden is this? The Garden of Eden, the gardens of the Hesperides, all this sort of thing. My grandmother's tomato patch, what is it? How did we get here? Eliot would say, it's a garden, any garden. What is a garden? It is an ordered, disciplined space which is brought into order with a distinct purpose, flowers, vegetables, whatever. But it's a disciplined space in the interest of beauty and fruitfulness. So this is why, or I can give you another example. You'll come across, or if you've tried reading four quartets, you will have come across horseshoe crabs. And you think, now what are they a symbol of? They're not a symbol of anything. They are horseshoe crabs. And the point that Eliot is making about them is that he doesn't go into this, but the point is they are some of the oldest living forms that we know of. And they've been here. And he's talking about walking along the beach with starfish and horseshoe crabs. And it hails you, any horseshoe crab on any beach, with the titanic mystery of the passage of time. These are prehistoric. My word, here I am waltzing along in the 20th century. Where has all this time gone? What hails me in the presence of this antiquity? It disturbs me. So that's when you run across something solid in an Eliot poem. It's not a symbol. It is itself. It's a case in point of what he's talking about. Now, to the task. What is Four Quartets about? As far as I can distill it, it's about the riddle that all of us, if you're operating on more than 1.5 watts in life, you will have found yourself scratching your head or mulling at some point or another over the riddle of time. Because you belong to a species, it doesn't bother the animals or the birds. They just go capering along through life. But we human beings, we men, are hag-ridden with the riddle of living in time when we've got, as Wordsworth put it, intimations of immortality. We have this deep-seated, indestructible hunch that we are made for eternity, or made for that which does not fade, that which will not drain away into nothing. We resist that. And as far as I can boil down Four Quartets, I believe that it rings the changes on this riddle that we mortals, we human beings live with, of having been made for that which is more than mere sequence, more than mere ashes in the end. But Eliot doesn't, it's not a Gnostic poem. He doesn't reject time. He doesn't bewail the reality of time. Lesser poets might do that, you know, oh, tra-la, tra-la, I wish we could just float off into eternity, and so on. What he sees is that time is the very condition of our salvation or damnation. It's what we do in time and with time. It is the very structure and precondition of our salvation or our damnation. And one of the most terrifying lines in the whole poem, for a whole sequence of poems, for me, is he rings the changes. He speaks of the poor people that you might see on the underground in London or a bus or something, and he sees their time-ridden faces, and he says it's as though they are distracted from distraction by distraction. Well, I mean, we live in an era whose whole modus vivendi, whose whole motivation is distraction. Have you ever heard of television? Distracted from distraction by distraction. What are we thinking about when we watch television? Unless you're like me and watch nothing but highbrow television, BBC, stuff like that. But, you know, we like to be distracted. Now, in this poem, people ask, why 4 quartets when there's 5 sections of each poem? Isn't that a quintet? Well, the quartet comes before that. There are 4 major sections, and my own hunch, Eliot doesn't volunteer this information, but that he is bespeaking the original 4 elements, earth, air, water, and fire. That these were this was the classical understanding of physics, that these are the basic things. And I think his 4 quartets ring the changes, but each, a quartet is a composition for 4 instruments: violin, viola, cello, and bass, or piano, whatever the 4 are. And the instruments for Eliot would be earth, air, fire, and water, I think. The 4 locations, if you have a copy with you, I know a couple of you brought it, you don't have to have it, but the poem is divided and it addresses 4 locations. The first section is called Burnt Norton. And that refers to a 17th century mansion house in Huntingdonshire, I think, which was burned down. So it used to be here, it ain't here now. Hey, what about that? The second section is called East Coker, and that is a little town in, which shire is it in? I was driving past it one time and saw the little sign that said East Coker. And Eliot traced his ancestry, some of his family, to this little village of East Coker. And in the little parish, Anglican parish church there, if you look up on the wall, there is a hatchment, as they call it, an oval, and Eliot's ashes are there. And he quoted a line which is attributed to Mary Queen of Scots when she had to put her head on the block when her ambiguous cousin Elizabeth I chopped her head off because she was a papist, and also because she wanted to take Elizabeth's throne, among other things. But Eliot, on this oval on the church wall there, it says, "Of your courtesy, pray for the soul of Thomas Stearns Eliot. In my end is my beginning." And of course, for any Christian, you know what that's all about. In my end, not just the end of when I collapse into the grave, but my end in the sense of the Greek telos, my destiny, the end for which I was created. In my end is my beginning, and in my beginning is my end. When you were conceived in a uterine wall, your whole biography was there. All the potentialities of you were there. And in that beginning is your destiny. And what you do with time is the big question. Do not ask, what is it, said Prufrock. And Eliot says, oh yes, you better ask, what is it, or you're going to go to hell. And then the third section is the dry salvages, and that's right here in our dooryard. It's just, there's some rocks off Eastern Point in Gloucester, and the sailors around here, the men who have their boats and so on, can tell you exactly where they are. I've been out there a dozen times I'm not a sailor myself, but my friends are. And, but I've never actually seen the dry salvages. I think they're visible at low tide. Is any sailor here? Tom, do you know? That's the third section. And then the fourth section is called Little Gidding. And that is a little community in England where a 17th century Anglican parson wanted to found a small community, a lay community of single and married people where the daily and weekly life would be ordered around the Mass. and what's called the horarium, the so-called monastic hours of the day, matins, prime, terce, sexto, and so on. So those are the 4 sections, and we'll come to them as we move along. By the way, if you're interested, I'm not a very good salesman for my own books, but you can't understand the poem without this book. It's called Dove Descending. I guess how you mentioned it, I don't know. I don't want to overkill, but you can't get into heaven without reading it. So now, I think I was going to tell you all about the Greek superscripts, which are in the front pages there, and they're if we have time at the end, I might mention them. But anyway, the great thing is to hear the poetry. So, Burnt Norton, the first section, and this is how the poem opens. And in a sense, he puts his cards on the table. Time, and you think this is nothing but prose. This is not poetry. Well, yes, it is. Time present and time past are both perhaps present in time future, and time future contained in time past. And if you're like a lot of us, you might want to throw in the sponge there and say, he's lost me already. But you already know about this. Time present and time past are both perhaps present in time future, and time future contained in time past. You know what an acorn is. What's there? It's here in the present. The whole mystery of oakness is in that acorn. And one fine day, given the right circumstances, it will be a magnificent, huge oak. So its end, the destiny of the acorn, is in its beginning. And in its beginning is the end, and so on. So the time present and time past. For Eliot, who was what we call an Anglo-Catholic, I can see at least one Anglo-Catholic in the audience here, they're Episcopalians who like to think they're Catholics, which they are. That's an insider's joke. It's not fair from a papist like me. But Eliot was a high church Episcopalian, Anglican, which is the smells and bells end of Episcopalianism. And at the center of his imagination, of course, was the Mass. And what is the Mass? It's time present, Sunday morning, October the 10th, in Hamilton, Massachusetts, or whatever. It's present. Time past, the mystery of Golgotha, the sacrifice of Calvary, is made present here. Time past, it's a reality here in time present, and time future. St. John's wonderful vision in the Apocalypse, he saw a lamb as it had been slain. The lamb slain from the foundation of the world. Time past, time present, time future. And in the Catholic and Anglican imagination and belief, theology, that is a case in point of time past, time present, time future, and time future contained in time past. If all time is eternally present, all time is unredeemable. If we've got nothing but the moment now, and it's just a question of getting through it and so on and leaving it behind, if we're distracted from distraction by distraction, it has no particular meaning, then all time is unredeemable. There's nothing you can do about it. Then he goes on to say, what might have been is an abstraction, remaining a perpetual possibility only in a world of speculation. Probably everybody in the room here has a, if only I could have been at that place at that time. If only I could, if only things had worked out with this boyfriend or girlfriend of mine and so on, and they didn't. Oh, if only. We all have that feeling. But he says, but what might have been, if you had married that person and lo and behold it didn't work out, what might have been, he says, it's an abstraction. It's remaining a perpetual possibility only in a world of speculation. It doesn't have solid reality. But then he goes, then he comes to a key word here. What might have been and what has been, one's unreal and one's real, what has been, point to one end, which is always present. Now, point is a major word in the 4 quartets. Point. It nudges us along. It crowds us along. It reminds us, it plucks our sleeve. What might have been and has been. Leave behind the what might have been and get real with what actually has been. It's always present. Now, I'm going to skip a bunch of lines here. If you're one of the people that has an edition with you, I'm skipping over to line 67 in Burnt Norton. This is a way I've skipped the East Coker, sorry, too far. All right, we have some lines here, starting at line 62, I think, yes. And in the 60s, before you all were born, but when the hippies came into play and began to run everything, every other coffee house was named the Still Point. And everybody loved that phrase. Well, Eliot got there first. He says, at the still point of the turning world, period. And you want to say, Eliot, that's not a sentence. Well, he put a period there, and he's Eliot, so you can cower. At the still point of the turning world, bump. Neither flesh nor fleshless, neither from nor towards. At the still point, there the dance is, and it's a major, major word in Eliot, and should be, if you're a Christian, in your vocabulary. The dance is synonymous with the architecture of the universe. It's the way things are ordered. It's the harmony of the universe, and that involves morals and everything else. You happen to live in an epoch where the notion is everything is up for grabs, there isn't any prior pattern to things, and we just makeshift the whole thing. Our morals, what I want to do, what gender is, and so on, everything is changing. Eliot would have said, not so. The dance is the magnificent, harmonious, blissful choreography of the universe. And if you wonder, well, what's the still point? Well, you already know about that. It's not a symbol at the center of every single wheel you've ever seen, your bike or anything else. The mathematicians tell me, I know nothing about it, that mathematically speaking, at the center of any wheel and so on, there is a point which is actually not moving. And yet it is the motivation of the whole movement of the wheel, and yet it is a still point. It's the animus behind the turning of the wheel. And he says there, at the still point of the turning world, there the dance is, but neither arrest nor movement. It's not dead still, but it's not mere moving. It isn't moving itself, and then he goes on to say, but do not call it fixity. It's quivering, it's alive, where past and future are gathered, neither movement from nor towards, neither ascent nor decline, except for the point, the still point, there would be no dance, and there is only the dance. I don't know whether you think about your life this way, but you are involved in a dance, an eternal, a sempiternal, a blissful, overwhelming dance, and your salvation or your damnation depends on whether you learn the steps in Eliot's books. I just caught sight of a former student of mine back there who knows more about four quartets than I do, and I wish he would tiptoe out. I'm now terrified. Oh dear, it's Johnny Skillen. God, I was going to say God bless him, I'll say that. In any event, he's used to this kind of pontificating. Now I'm now skipping along. This is just so you can hear some of these lines. Skipping over to Roman numeral 3, if you have your Bibles in your laps. And he's speaking of here in ordinary life. Here is a place of disaffection, time before and time after in a dim light. Neither daylight investing form with lucid stillness, turning shadow into transient beauty with slow rotation suggesting permanence. In other words, in real daylight and so on, where you're given the chance to see with lucidity and so on, this lucid stillness where you can really see. That's the reason the lighting in an art museum is important. So you can see what the artist wants you to see. The lighting anywhere. The sun comes up in the morning and you can see the garden and so forth. But he says here, when we're trapped in the mere sequence of time, we have these experiences where it's neither daylight nor darkness to purify the soul. And this is a major motif or theme or reality in Eliot's four quartets. The light, of course, that's one of the metaphors that we grope at to try to approach the notion of eternal bliss and so on. The light of heaven, the brightness of heaven and all of that. But darkness is also, if you read the saints and so on, you will realize that the way toward the light has got to include darkness. Darkness to purify the soul. I'll keep on reading here because he's the one who says it better. The purification, the divesting oneself of the distractions and so on, the silence and the darkness. He says, in this place of disaffection, it's neither daylight nor darkness to purify the soul, emptying the sensual with deprivation, being deprived, cleansing affection from the temporal. Are your affections cleansed from the temporal? Think about it. Fall on your knees, wondering about it. Neither plenitude, fullness, nor vacancy. All we get here is this somewhat higgledy-piggledy sequence. Only a flicker we get. And this is a desperate picture coming up here. He's looking, I'm jumping ahead a few lines, but he's looking, as it were, at the faces that you might see in the London Underground, the commuters, should we say. It doesn't have to be that, but only a flicker over the strained, time-ridden faces. Here's distracted from distraction by distraction. These people, what are they thinking about or not thinking about? Filled with fancies and empty of meaning, tumid apathy, swollen, diseased apathy, tumid apathy, with no concentration. Men and bits of paper. How do you like that bit? Tumid men and bits of paper whirled by the cold wind that blows before and after time, wind in and out of unwholesome lungs, bad breath, or the lungs of the soul, where there's nothing in there but rottenness. Time before and time after. Eructation of unhealthy souls, halitosis. Into the faded air, the torpid, people trapped in torpor, which is even more than a stupor. The torpid, driven on the wind that sweeps the gloomy hills of London, Hampstead and Clerkenwell, Camden and Putney, Highgate, Primrose and Ludgate. These are the stops on the Underground in London. Not here, the darkness, the purifying darkness, the salvific darkness. Not here, in this twittering world. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. Well, where do we go next? All right, we're going to jump over to East Coker now. It's a major tragedy to leave out lines, but we'd be here all night. So we go to East Coker. This is the little village where he traced his hand. So all of these have to do with time. Burnt Norton, that which was and is no more, or that which was and is still present. There's a burnt spot in the ground where the manor house at East Coker was. I'm at Burnt Norton, East Coker. His ancestors were there. He's there, dead now, and so on. In my beginning is my end. Write a term paper on that. It's wonderful. In my beginning is my end. In my creation, in my conception is my destiny. In my beginning is my end. And also, if we're mortal, in my beginning is my end, in the sense that if you're born into this mortal coil, you're going to die. You're not going to get out of it. In my beginning is my end. And then he gives us a series of wonderful pictures. They're not symbols, they're real. In succession, houses rise and fall. And by the way, in Eliot, that's a real house that was built in 1400 and something and is toppling over now, or maybe has toppled over. But these are also, it can be, doesn't have to be, the royal houses of Europe, the dynasty, the house of your family, and so on. The Hohenzollerns, the Wittgensteins, the Habsburgs, the Windsors, and so forth, the Lancasters and the Yorks. In succession, houses rise and fall, crumble, are extended, are removed, destroyed, restored, or in their place is an open field, or a factory, or a bypass. That's British for cloverleaf or a traffic circle or one of these interchanges, or a bypass. Old stone to new. And by the way, Eliot loved the apparently unpoetic eructation of unhealthy souls. And you want to say, that's not poetry. For goodness sakes. He loved that. He loved to startle you. He loved to bother you. Old stone to new building. Oh, look at these neat old stones here. Let's build our house out of it. Old stone to new building, old timber to new fires, old fires to ashes, and ashes to earth, which is already flesh, fur, and feces, bone of man and beast, corn stalk and leaf. Houses live and die. There is a time for building, he's quoting Ecclesiasticus here, time for building and a time for living and for generation, and a time for the wind to break the loosened pane, and to shake the wainscot where the field mouse trots. Do you know what a wainscot is? It's a baseboard that's about shoulder high, and in old ruined mansions and so on, the field mouse trots behind the old wainscot. And to shake the tattered arras, the old tapestry on the castle wall, woven with a silent motto, Onis Vaki Malipons, or etc., Semper Fidelis, these mottos. And here it is, it's just rags now. In my beginning is my end. Let me see how far I want to read here. East Coker. No, I'm stopping there. All right, now we're going to jump over here to the wisdom of old men. You thought they were wise. All right. Do not let me hear of the wisdom of old men, these great sages, so on. Don't let me hear of the wisdom of old men, but rather of their folly, their fear of fear. I don't want to hear about fear. Distract me. I'll turn on the telly. Their fear of fear and frenzy, their fear of possession, of belonging to another, or to others, or to God. This is Eliot. He just plunks that in there. The only wisdom we can hope to acquire is the wisdom of humility. Humility is endless. The houses are all gone under the sea. The dancers are all gone under the hill. We had to skip a wonderful picture of 17th century peasants with their muddy feet clomping away in a folk dance out in the field and so on. But he says, don't let me hear of the wisdom of old men, but rather of their folly. You don't get wise just by passing through time. This will cheer you up. Roman numeral 3. Oh, dark, dark, dark. They all go into the dark. The vacant interstellar space. Where do you go when you die? If you're a Christian, you hope you're going to waltz into paradise somewhere. If you're a Catholic, you think you're going to have to go via purgatory. But in any event, they all go into the dark, the vacant interstellar spaces. The vacant into the vacant. Me, nothing in my head. Into the vacant. And then you have this wonderful roster of impressive men. The captains, merchant, bankers, eminent men of letters, TS Eliot among others, the generous patrons of art, the statesmen and the rulers, distinguished civil servants, chairmen of many committees, industrial lords, and petty contractors all go into the dark. And dark, the sun and moon, and the almanac, the Gotha, that's the almanac of European royalty, the almanac, the Gotha, and the stock exchange gazette, not very poetic, the directory of directors, and cold the sense, and lost the motive of action. And we all go with them into the silent funeral, nobody's funeral, for there is no one to bury. This was a non-entity. He never caught hold. He never was incarnate into actuality. No one to bury. I said to my soul, be still, and let the dark come upon you, which shall be the darkness of God. It's not the vacant interstellar spaces. The saints knew what it was to invite the darkness of solitude and silence. That's where the richness and the light came from in what they wrote for us. Let the dark, I said to my soul, be still, at the still point of the turning world, and let the dark come upon you, which shall be the darkness of God. And now I skip over to line 147. Roman numeral 4. here again, you think, how did we get here? Well, you all know about this anyway. The wounded surgeon plies the steel that questions the distempered part. What's going on there? You're in an operating room. Well, who's the wounded surgeon? Oh, it must be a symbol for somebody, Christ or somebody. Any surgeon is wounded. He scraped his knee when he was a boy. He broke his arm one time playing sports. Any surgeon is wounded. All surgeons are wounded. The wounded, being mortal, he's wounded, wounded with mortality. The wounded surgeon plies the steel, the knife, the scalpel, that questions the distempered part. There's a disease in here. Let me poke in here. Let me lay this aside. Let me get on in there. That questions the distempered part. And beneath the bleeding hands, maybe his hands or his latex gloves now are bloody from the operation, or bleeding in the sense that he's mortal, he's vulnerable, he's a human being. Beneath the bleeding hands, we feel the sharp compassion of the healer's art, resolving the enigma of the fever chart. The chart hanging on the end of the bed on the clipboard, you know, you got these symptoms, this, and the other thing the patient is complaining of. What's wrong with this patient? Let's cut them open and get in there and see. And you might say that that's cruel. This man's cutting me. But Eliot calls this the sharp compassion of the healer. I want you to get well. So we got to go in here. Our only health is the disease if we obey the dying nurse, whose constant care is not to please, but to remind of our and Adam's curse, and that to be restored, our sickness must grow worse. And I think, now this is very melancholy, very discouraging. But our only health is the disease if we obey the dying nurse. If I do what the dying nurse tells me to do, then there is health. Health is in the cards and so on. If we obey the dying nurse. Some people try to make that a symbol. I'm not a symbol hunter, but for the church. The church is the handmaiden, the associate of the surgeon, the great physician, and so on. If you want that, you can go with that if you like to. But whose constant care, the nurse isn't in there to say, oh, now let's see how should we make you comfy. She may do that if it's time to, but sometimes she makes you very uncomfortable. Wake up, it's time for your hypodermic needle, it's 3 a.m., and so on. Whose constant care is not to please, but to remind us of our and Adam's curse. Thou shalt die unless. And that to be restored, our sickness must grow worse. We've got to bite the bullet, admit it, get into the fullness of it, and then there's a chance that our sickness may get, our mortality may be healed. The whole earth is our hospital, endowed by the ruined millionaire. Johnny, do you have a text on that? I've never been able, I think it's, but now here's a symbol. I think it's Adam. He was a millionaire, he had everything, and he endowed us with the fall. But is that all right? Okay, thumbs up from Johnny Skiller. We're on safe turf here, everybody. Endowed by the ruined millionaire, wherein if we do well, get this, we shall die of the absolute paternal care that will not leave us, it won't leave us alone, but prevents us. It's old usage of the word prevent, meaning precede, goes ahead of us, but prevents us everywhere. The absolute, well, what's the absolute paternal care? The Father, the archetypal Father, the only Father there is ultimately. And we will die, and that is, of course, referring to our mortality, but it's also, in order to live, we have to die. If you've forgotten about that, read the Gospels again, and you'll get some unhappy news there. You've got to die. The chill ascends from feet to knees. It reminds you of Sir John Falstaff with Mistress Quickly describing him on his deathbed there. The chill ascends from feet to knees. The fever sings in mental wires. If to be warmed, then I must freeze and quake in frigid purgatorial fires, of which the flame is roses and the smoke is briars. Eliot, you're lost here. You're lost in a lot of paradoxes. No. But but he's a high church Episcopalian, Church of England, so he believes in purgatory. If that puts you off, all that refers to really is that mystery whereby the work of grace in us is brought to completion, and it may go on beyond death. That is to say, he which hath begun a good work in you will perform it until the day of Jesus Christ. The work of grace goes on in making us, and so Eliot can call this the frigid purgatorial fires. Which is it? Absolute zero or the boiling point and so on? It's both. It's the bringing to the end of that which I've cherished so much, and it is the purging of the fire and so on. Now put this in your 20th century pipe and smoke it, you secular aesthetes and readers of poetry. I mean, what does a secularist make of this? The dripping blood, our only drink. The bloody flesh, our only food. In spite of which, we like to think that we are sound, substantial flesh and blood. Again, in spite of that, we call this Friday good. Why is it a Good Friday? It's the most horrible day in the history of the creation. And yet, and yet, and yet. I mean, there's a plenitude, there's a fructifying of paradoxes here. What is our ultimate only drink? Unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no life in you. All right. Moving right along, as they say, oh, dark, 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 the wounded surgeon. We now come to the dry salvages. I'm just keeping my eye on the clock here. Dry salvages, these little rocks off. And Eliot, by the way, his family was a New England family, but he grew up in St. Louis. So his part of the family had moved there. But they spent their summers on Eastern Point here in Gloucester, and he loved to sail. So he would know all about the dry salvages. Let's see, where am I going to pick it up here? Line 15. Now he's talking about the river. That's a lovely part. But he speaks of this. The sea is the land's edge. There's nothing you can do about the ocean. You can't plow it. You can't dam it. You can't manage it. The sea is the land. As long as you're on the land, you can do something about it. But the sea is the land's edge also. The granite into which it reaches, the beaches where it tosses its hints of earlier and other creation, walking along the beach. The starfish, the horseshoe crab, the whale's backbone, the pools where it offers to our curiosity the more delicate algae, we would say algae, Eliot pronounces it algae, the more delicate algae and the sea anemone, these proto-historic creatures. It tosses up our losses, as one of them. The torn seine, fisherman's net, the shattered lobster pot, the broken oar, and the gear of foreign dead men. The sea has many voices, many gods, and many voices. The salt is on the briar rose, the fog is in the fir trees. Let me see if I'm reading farther than I mean to read here. No, we can carry on. The fog is in the fir trees. The sea howl and the sea yelp. If you've ever been on the beach when there was no other sound, no traffic and so on, you know that you can get all sorts of different voices. Often heard together, the whine in the rigging, the menace and caress of wave that breaks on water, the distant rote in the granite teeth, and the wailing warning from the approaching headland. These are all sea voices. And the heaving groaner. There is a buoy out here off. My wife and I could hear it from our bedroom in Beverly Farms when we lived there. And you could hear this thing. It's a haunting, wonderful, marvelous, frightening, fathomless sound. The heaving groaner, rounded homewards, and the seagull. Under the oppression of the silent fog, the tolling bell. There are bell buoys too, clang, clang, clang. Under the oppression of the silent fog, the tolling bell measures time, not our time, rung by the unhurried groundswell, a time older than the time of chronometers, older than the time counted by anxious, worried women, the women up here in these big houses up in Newburyport, where the wives of the clipper ship captains waited and watched for their husbands. There were no cell phones. then, and so on. Sometimes 3 years. Older than the time counted by anxious, worried women, lying awake and calculating the future. Is he going to come back or isn't he? Trying to unweave, unwind, unravel, and piece together the past and the future between midnight and dawn, where the past is all deception, the future futureless before the morning watch, when time stops and time is never ending, and the groundswell that is and was from the beginning clangs the bell. It's the groundswell that makes that bell ring. And it's frightening, and it's electrifying, and it's mesmerizing, and it's haunting, and so forth. All right, lobster pots. 129. What do you have here? Oh, yes. I wonder if I've got time. You know, I'm going to skip this. Moving right along, as they say. This is a lovely part. Eliot has fun. I mean, he's very courteous, very polite. He was an elegantly civilized man, but he is mercilessly mocking all the attempts to peer into all the cheap, cheesy attempts to peer into the future with, you know, what's this stuff in the newspaper? What is it? Horoscope. Yeah, that's probably a sin. You don't believe it. But Eliot would have. In other words, because it doesn't belong to our mortality to know the future. So I don't know. You can quarrel with that in some prayer group you have. Is it a sin? But this is Eliot's description of all this nonsense. To communicate with Mars, you know, the planets. I was born under the sign of so-and-so, therefore I have this inclination. To communicate with Mars, converse with spirits, Ouija boards, and so on. To report the behavior of the sea monster. Describe the horoscope. Haruspicate. I'll give you $1 if you know what that word means. Skillen does. But it means rummaging through sheep's entrails, which they did in Rome, the priests, to try to find out whether Ptolemy of Egypt is going to come over and beat you in a battle. To describe the haruspicate or scry, to descry the future. Observe disease in signatures, graphoanalysis, forsooth. Evoke biography from the wrinkles of the palm. All those palm readers you go to, you know, dressed like somebody from nowhere beside the road in Florida. Biography from the wrinkles of the palm, and tragedy from fingers. Release omens by sortilege, casting lots. Or tea leaves. Riddle the inevitable with playing cards, the tarot pack. Fiddle with pentagrams or barbituric acids, Timothy, what's his name, in the 60s. Or dissect the recurrent image into preconscious terrors, Jung and company. To explore the womb or tomb or dreams. All these are usual pastimes and drugs. Eliot just dismisses them. All these are usual pastimes and drugs and features of the press. What could be more infra-dig? And always will be, some of them especially, when there is distress of nations and perplexity, whether on the shores of Asia or in the Edgware Road or on Boylston Street at the Marathon. The Edgware Road is just one of the big roads in London. Men's curiosity searches past and future and clings to that dimension. But, to apprehend the point of the intersection of the timeless with time is an occupation for the saint. No occupation either, but something given and taken in a lifetime's death in love, ardor and selflessness and self-surrender. For most of us, there is only the unattended moment, the moment in and out of time, the distraction fit, lost in a shaft of sunlight, the wild time unseen, or the winter lightning, or the waterfall, or music heard so deeply that it is not heard at all, but you are the music while the music lasts. These are only hints and guesses. Are you picking up the hints and guesses? Big gang. Hints followed by guesses. And the rest, here comes some hammer blows, and the rest is prayer, observance, discipline, thought, and action. The hint half guessed, the gift half understood is incarnation. God came into our time and in our flesh. Here, the impossible union of spheres of existence is actual in the Incarnation. Here, the past and future are conquered and reconciled to the Creator, the eternal second person of the Most Holy Trinity, here in Bethlehem, dead, risen again, coming again, and so forth. Ponder it. Where action were otherwise mere movement of that which is only moved and has no source of movement. All right, now I'm going to skip in finishing to Little Gidding, the little community, which was to be organized around really the Mass and the canonical hours, as they're called, in the breviary, the monastic hours. And what shall we pick here? Line 39. All right, it's you're the tourist. If you came this way, there's almost nothing there. There's just a little tiny chapel there now. At least the last time I was there, that's all was there. Is there anything more there? Yeah. If you came this way, taking any route, starting from anywhere, at any time, or at any season, it would always be the same. You would have to put off sense and notion. You are not here to verify, instruct yourself, or inform curiosity, or carry report. Let's see what the travel book says about this here, and so forth. Or was Nicholas Gidding right or wrong? You're not here to verify, instruct yourself, or inform curiosity, or carry report. You are here to kneel where prayer has been valid. And prayer is more than an order of words, the conscious occupation of the praying mind, or the sound of the voice praying. And what the dead had no speech for when living, they can tell you being dead. The communication of the dead is tongued with fire beyond the language of the living. Here, the intersection of the timeless moment is England and nowhere, never and always. It's here and it could be here in this room, the point of the intersection of the timeless with time. It's in the liturgy, it's in the Mass. And so. And then, yes, a lovely little lyric here. I'm just going to pick part of it. This is in the 4th section, Roman numeral 4. And he raises this question. It's the 2nd stanza in this, if you're following. Who then devised the torment? And every person sitting in the room has had torment. You've had your heart broken, you've broken a bone, you've been crushed by some development, and so forth, whatever it's been. There's nobody here that doesn't know about torment. Well, who then devised the torment? Well, a cosmic sadist, obviously. I mean, hey, this, I didn't ask for this. Well, Eliot doesn't agree with you. Who then devised the torment? Question mark, love, period. Love is the unfamiliar capital name behind the hands that wove the intolerable shirt of flame, like Medea wove for, was it Jason? The intolerable shirt of flame, which human power cannot remove. We only live, only suspire, consumed by either fire or fire. Ultimately, either the fire of my own creating, the solitude, the fire of hell, which is bottomless and meaningless, or the fire of the divine love. And then, this is the end. We shall not cease from exploration, says Eliot, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started, the wheel and so on. And in a sense, Eden was as close as you can get to paradise in our own globe. Will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. We live in a murk. As long as you live your mortal life and live in history and mere time and so on, we only pick up hints and guesses, fugitive hints and guesses. What was that all about? What did that mean? And know the place for the first time. Through the unknown, remembered gate, when the last of earth left to discover is that which was the beginning. At the source of the longest river, the voice of the hidden waterfall and the children in the apple tree, not known because not looked for, but heard, half heard, in the stillness between two waves of the sea. It's all so fugitive. I didn't get hold of that. Quick now, here, now, always. Get these next two lines. A condition of complete simplicity, parenthesis, costing not less than everything. You have to die. Costing not less than everything. And then, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well, when the tongues of flame are enfolded into the crowned knot of fire, and the fire and the rose are one. And I understand the theme of today is beauty, right? The fire, the celestial rose, Dante's celestial rose. It's probably as close as nature can get to bespeaking that perfection and mystery and beauty of the eternal. And let me read it again. Eliot got this from Dame Julian of Norwich, who was an anchoress, bricked up in a cell. And when she died, they just put the brick in. She's still there. Dead. And all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well when the tongues of flame are enfolded into the crown knot of fire, and the fire and the rose are one. And I hope you heard the difference between that all shall be well that Eliot and Dame Julian are speaking of, and the usual, oh, everything is going to be okay. Everything will be hunky-dory. Don't worry, it's okay. How often, I mean, I was looking at the people on Boylston Street the other day. It's okay. Well, it's not okay. I've been blown to pieces. Or it's not okay for anybody in here. You're going to suffer and die. But Dame Julian said, and Eliot echoed her, all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well, when the tongues of flame are enfolded into the crown knot of fire, and the rose are one. Thank you for your attention.